Distance didn't enter our home like an argument. It didn't knock. It didn't announce itself. It arrived quietly, between conversations, inside pauses, in the spaces where words used to live. After Saad got married, everyone kept saying how lucky I was. A good son, a respectful daughter-in-law, a peaceful home. And they were right. Nothing was wrong, but nothing was the same either. I noticed it in the mornings first. Saad used to wander into the kitchen half awake, coffee cup in hand, asking what I was making before he even said good morning. Now, he checked his phone, whispered plans to Sanaa, and left with a quick smile in my direction. Sanaa was kind. Always kind. She asked if I slept well. She thanked me for meals. But kindness has distance too, measured, careful, polite. And I felt myself standing a little farther away each day, unsure where to place my hands, my voice, my presence. Distance doesn't come from hate. Sometimes, it comes from love that rearranges itself. I learned quickly that no one meant to push me out. That made it harder. If Sanaa took over the kitchen, it wasn't control, it was confidence. If Saad stopped asking my opinion, it wasn't rejection, it was independence. All reasonable, all normal. So why did it hurt? Because distance isn't about intention. It's about impact. I began noticing how conversations changed when I entered a room. Not stopping, but adjusting. Lower voices. Shifted topics. Gentle smiles that said, "We're okay. You don't need to worry." I didn't want to worry, I wanted to belong. So I adapted. I spoke less. I waited more. I stopped offering help unless asked. I told myself this was growth, maturity, the natural order of things. But at night, when the house settled, I felt the space between us stretch wider. Not empty, just unreachable. Distance, I realized, isn't absence. It's being present without being part of the moment. At some point, distance stopped hurting sharply. It dulled. I developed routines that didn't require anyone else. Morning walks. Quiet lunches. Evenings with books instead of conversations. I wasn't isolating myself. I was adjusting to the shape life had chosen. Saad noticed once. "Amy, you're very quiet these days." I smiled. "Am I?" He nodded but didn't press. He never did. Distance teaches people not to ask questions they might not like the answers to. Sanaa tried in her own way. She invited me to sit with them. Asked my opinion on small things. But I could feel the effort behind it, and effort has its own distance. I didn't want forced closeness. I wanted natural nearness. And when that didn't return, I learned how to live without it. Distance became familiar. Almost comfortable. Like furniture you stop bumping into once you memorize where it stands. One afternoon, I realized something important. I hadn't been pushed away. I had slowly stepped back. Distance was no longer something happening to me. It was something I was choosing, to protect myself from expecting too much. I stopped waiting for invitations, stopped explaining my moods, stopped hoping moments would stretch long enough to include me. And strangely, that choice brought peace. Saad and Sanaa continued their lives. I continued mine. We coexisted kindly, respectfully, quietly. Distance, when chosen, feels different. It doesn't ache the same way. It becomes space you can breathe in. Still, there were moments, small, unexpected ones, when Saad would sit beside me, or Sanaa would laugh with me over something trivial. And in those moments, I felt how thin the distance really was. Not gone. Just resting. The truth is, distance didn't mean love disappeared. It meant love changed its posture. One evening, Saad sat with me longer than usual. No phone. No rush. Just presence. "You've given us a lot of space," he said quietly. I nodded. "You needed it." "And you?" he asked. I thought for a moment. I needed to learn how to stay without holding too tightly. He didn't respond right away. He just held my hand. And in that simple gesture, I felt something soften. Not the distance, but my fear of it. Sanaa joined us later, sitting across the room, smiling gently. No tension. No expectations. Just shared space. I understood then that distance isn't always loss. Sometimes, It's love learning how to exist without possession, without obligation, without pain. I was still his mother, still her elder, still part of the home, just no longer at the center. And for the first time, that didn't feel like disappearance. It felt like balance. Distance hadn't taken my place at IT, had simply given me my own. Distance eventually stops feeling like something temporary. It settles in, learns the rhythm of your days, learns where you sit, when you speak, how softly you move. I didn't fight it anymore. I woke up early, before the house needed me. The mornings belonged to me now. I drank my tea slowly, not listening for footsteps, not waiting for voices. Just breathing in the quiet like it was something earned. Saad and Sana had their routines. Their schedules overlapped in ways mine no longer did. They spoke in half sentences, shared looks that didn't require explanation. That's what partnership looks like, I reminded myself. Still, there were moments when I felt like a guest in a house that carried my history in its walls. One afternoon, I rearranged old photo albums. Saad as a child. Saad as a teenager. Saad before the world expanded beyond me. Sana appeared at the doorway and watched quietly. "You kept everything," she said. "Yes," I replied. "Some things don't ask permission to stay." She nodded, understanding more than she said. Distance doesn't always separate people. Sometimes it reveals them. There's a certain silence that grows when people stop misunderstanding each other. Not because they finally understand, but because they stop trying to explain. That silence lived between us now. Saad would ask if I was okay. I would say yes. And both of us would mean different things. I noticed how carefully he spoke around me, as if afraid of reopening something unnamed.
Sana did the same.
They weren't unkind. They were cautious. Distance teaches caution. One evening, I overheard Sana say, "Amy probably prefers being alone." She didn't mean it cruelly, but it landed heavy. I realized then how easily distance rewrites your story for others. Silence becomes preference. Withdrawal becomes personality. And before you know it, people stop offering because they assume you no longer want. I could have corrected her. I didn't, because distance had already taught me how expensive honesty can be. At some point, I stopped seeing distance as loss. I began seeing it as shelter. I no longer felt the sting of missed invitations the same way. I no longer measured my importance by how often my name was called. I learned how to enjoy moments without attaching expectations to them. That's when I understood something painful and freeing at the same time. Distance had saved me from resentment. If I had stayed emotionally close while being slowly excluded, I would have broken quietly. Distance gave me room to love without bitterness. Saad hugged me one morning before leaving for work. It surprised both of us. "You okay, Amy?" he asked. "I am," I said honestly. And for once, that honesty didn't feel heavy. Distance doesn't always grow wider. Sometimes it softens. There were moments, unexpected, unplanned, when the space between us felt thinner. Shared laughter. A long conversation over dinner. Sana asking me something personal, not practical. Those moments didn't erase distance. They rested inside it. I learned not to cling to them, not to read promises into them. I let them exist as they were, real, brief, kind. And strangely, that made them more meaningful. I wasn't trying to return to who we were. I was learning how to stay present in who we had become. I used to think distance meant I was losing my place. I was wrong. Distance didn't remove me from their lives. It repositioned me. I was no longer the center, but I was still the ground. The quiet place they returned to without realizing why it felt safe. One night, Saad said, "You've changed." I smiled. "So have you." "And Sana," he added. "Yes," I said softly. "That's how life moves forward." He sat with me longer that night. Sana joined us. No awkwardness. No forced closeness. Just shared silence that didn't ache. And I realized something final, something I wish someone had told me earlier. Distance doesn't mean love failed. It means love learned how to breathe. I didn't disappear. I didn't step away. I simply learned how to stand at a distance without losing myself and without losing them. And that was enough. No one tells you that aging isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with gray hair or tired bones. It arrives when you realize no one is watching you closely anymore. I noticed it in small ways. No one asked if I'd eaten, and no one checked if I was tired, and no one reminded me to rest. Not because they didn't care, but because they assumed I had learned how to take care of myself. And maybe I had, but care, when it disappears quietly, leaves a strange echo behind. Saad and Sana were busy building a future. I was maintaining a past. Two timelines under the same roof, rarely intersecting. I started moving more slowly, not physically, but emotionally. I didn't rush to respond. Didn't jump to fill silence. Didn't correct misunderstandings. Distance had taught me that not every moment needs my presence to be complete. And yet, some nights, I missed being someone whose absence would be noticed immediately. One afternoon, I found myself sitting with old letters. Not dramatic ones. Simple notes. Lists. Reminders written in my younger handwriting when my days revolved around Saad's needs, his worries, his small victories. Sana watched me quietly. "What are those?" she asked. "Proof," I said. "Of what?" "That I once mattered in ways that don't exist anymore." She didn't know how to respond. And I didn't expect her to. Some truths aren't meant to be shared across generations. Distance exists between memory and present, too. I wasn't grieving Saad, I was grieving the version of myself that belonged entirely to someone else. And distance was helping me let her rest. People often mistake distance for coldness.
Saad did once.
"Amy, you don't talk much anymore," he said gently. "I talk," I replied. "Just not urgently." He looked confused. I wanted to explain. That urgency comes from fear. From the need to secure a place. From the terror of being forgotten. Distance had removed that urgency from me. I wasn't pulling away. I was standing still while life moved around me. And sometimes standing still looks like distance to those who are still running. There came a day when Sana cried. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold. "I don't always know how to include you," she admitted. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone younger than I remembered, someone trying not to fail at a role no one trains you for. "I know," I said. That was all. Distance doesn't always mean separation. Sometimes, it creates the space where honesty can finally exist. From that day on, nothing changed visibly. But something softened. If there's one thing distance taught me, it's this. Love doesn't disappear when roles change. It changes its distance. I no longer needed to be central, that I no longer needed to be constant, that I no longer needed to be required. I was still here. Still remembering, still caring, still loving.
Just not loudly.
One evening, Saad kissed my forehead the way he used to when he was younger. Sana watched, smiling softly. In that moment, I felt no longing, no ache, just peace. Distance hadn't taken anything from me. It had returned something I lost long ago, myself.
And that was enough.
There was a time when my voice filled this house. Not loudly, but consistently. Decisions passed through me.
Questions found me.
Even silence waited for my approval before settling. Now, my voice belonged mostly to myself. I spoke aloud less. But inside, I had never been clearer. Distance gives you that gift, the ability to hear your own thoughts without interruption. To recognize which parts of yourself were shaped by responsibility and which were always yours. I realized how much of my life had been lived in response to others. How rarely I had asked what I needed once the children grew up. Distance didn't steal my voice. It returned it. One evening, we all sat together longer than usual. No one was in a hurry. No phones. No plans pressing against the moment. Sana asked me about my childhood. Not out of obligation, but curiosity. As I spoke, I noticed something unexpected. They were listening. Not waiting their turn, not nodding politely, but really listening. I wasn't leading the conversation. I wasn't guiding anything. I was simply present, and that was enough. Distance had changed how I was seen. Not as the center, but as someone whole. And that kind of visibility felt deeper than importance ever had. There are nights when distance still scares me. Not because I'm lonely, but because I wonder how easily a person can fade from relevance without leaving the room. I think about aging, about being needed less, about how society quietly steps away from women once their usefulness is assumed complete. Distance doesn't erase that fear, but it teaches you how to carry it without collapsing under its weight. I stopped asking whether I mattered. I started asking whether I felt at peace. And most days now, I do. Saad said something one day that surprised me. I didn't realize how much space you were giving us. I looked at him. I wasn't giving. I was learning. Learning what? How to love you without holding you. He nodded slowly, like someone finally understanding a language he'd heard all his life but never translated. Distance had done what explanations never could. It taught us without confrontation, without blame, without wounds. If I could speak to the woman I used to be, the one afraid of being left behind, I would tell her this. Distance is not abandonment. Distance is not failure. Distance is not the end. Sometimes, distance is love choosing a quieter form. I am still here, still part of this family, still loving deeply. Just without urgency, without fear, without needing to be needed. Distance didn't take my place. It taught me how to stand in it without disappearing. And in that lesson, I found a peace that closeness alone never gave me. I used to think legacy meant being remembered loudly. Stories told. Sacrifices acknowledged. Gratitude spoken out loud. But distance taught me a different truth. Legacy is quieter. It lives in the way Saad speaks patiently, and how Sanaa pauses before reacting, and the calm they carry into their disagreements. None of that mentions my name. And yet I know where it came from. Distance stripped away my need to be credited. What remained was influence, deep, invisible, lasting. I realized then that legacy doesn't need proximity. It needs time. There was a day Sanaa cooked without asking me anything. No questions. No checking. No hesitation. And for the first time, I didn't feel replaced. I felt relieved. Roles are heavy when you carry them too long. Distance had lifted that weight from my hands without taking love with it. I watched her move confidently through the kitchen and thought, this is how it should be. Distance had separated me from the role, not from the bond. Distance can harden people. It didn't harden me. It softened me in a different way. I no longer guarded myself with expectations. I no longer braced for disappointment. I allowed moments to be gentle without demanding permanence. When Saad hugged me now, I didn't wonder how long it would last. I just felt it. Distance gave me the courage to be soft without fear. Time used to frighten me. Each year felt like proof that I was moving further from relevance. Now time feels like an ally. Distance taught me that aging isn't disappearance. It's release. A gradual letting go of urgency, of proving, of insisting. I don't rush conversations anymore. I don't compete with the present. I exist within it. And that feels like freedom. If distance could speak, it wouldn't apologize. It would explain. It would say, I came so you wouldn't break, trying to stay close. I came so love could survive without possession. I came so you could meet yourself again. I am no longer afraid of distance. I know now it was never the enemy. It was the space where I learned how to love without losing myself, how to stay without clinging, how to be present without being central. I am still here. And that is enough. There was a time when I explained everything. Why I was quiet, why I stayed in my room, why I didn't join conversations the way I used to. Now I explain nothing. Distance freed me from justification. I no longer feel the need to clarify my emotions or translate my silence into something acceptable. I let it exist as it is, whole, honest, unedited. Saad once asked, Are you happy, Amy? I thought carefully before answering. I'm at peace, I said. He smiled, and for the first time, he didn't try to fix or follow up. Distance had taught him too. One evening, Sanaa knocked on my door. Not to ask a question, not to check on me, just to sit. We didn't talk much. The room held us gently, like it understood the weight of unsaid things. Before leaving, she said, I'm glad you're here.
Not we need you, not please stay involved.
Just, I'm glad. Distance had made space for something genuine, presence without obligation. And I realized then that being chosen, even quietly, feels different when it isn't demanded. Belonging returned slowly, not as a role, not as responsibility, but as warmth. Shared meals without expectations. Comfortable silences. Laughter that didn't glance around for approval. I no longer felt outside of moments. I felt alongside them. Distance had rearranged us, not separated us. And that difference mattered.
Distance didn't wound me.
It marked me, like a tree shaped by wind, not broken, just changed. I carry that mark now with quiet pride. It reminds me that I survived a season where love changed shape, and I had to change with it. I didn't cling that I didn't disappear. I adapted. And adaptation, I learned, is its own kind of strength. If this story has a final truth, it is this. Distance is not the space between people. It is the space where people learn who they are without each other. I am still Saad's mother, still Sanaa's elder, still part of this home. But I am also my own woman, complete, grounded, unafraid. Distance didn't take my love. It taught me how to hold it without fear, without urgency, without losing myself. And in that quiet understanding, this story finds its end. Years from now, no one will remember the exact moment I stepped back. There won't be a date attached to it. No dramatic memory anyone can point to and say, that's when things changed. Distance doesn't announce itself. It settles in slowly, like dust in sunlight. Almost invisible, yet impossible to deny once you see it. What they will remember is calmer days, a steadier home, fewer unspoken tensions. They may not trace that peace back to me. And that's okay. Because what remains after distance is not absence, it's balance. I sit in the living room sometimes, watching Saad talk, watching Sanaa laugh. They move with confidence now, with ease. Their love has grown into its own rhythm, unmonitored and unafraid. I don't interrupt. I don't insert myself to feel important. I let moments belong to them. And strangely, that's when I feel most present. Distance taught me that love doesn't need proof, respect doesn't need reminders, and belonging doesn't always look like being needed. Sometimes, it looks like being trusted enough to step away. I didn't choose distance because I lacked self-respect. I chose it because I finally respected myself enough to stop shrinking where I was no longer seen. I am still here, still loving, still whole. And that is how this story ends, not with loss but with quiet strength.